The 1960 horror movie Psycho has a timeless and effortless effect on the horror genre and the movie industry. The movie is infamous for the description of sex, violence, and language. Famous director Alfred Hitchcock, along with screenplay writer Joseph Stefano, had masterfully designed the film containing suspense, horror, and drama. Because of this movie, countless of other horror movies had been created, let alone the breaking of the Hays Code that had been enforced for many years before. Psycho is more than just a classic. All movie fans consider Psycho to be an amazingly depicted film. Not only the depiction of horror, but the methods that were used in and after the film. Movie fans of all genres and all ages are still appreciating the masterfully crafted scenes and rash questions that the movie brought up. When Alfred Hitchcock released Psycho, many questions and statements had become controversial. The reasoning for the controversy surrounding Psycho is because of the Hays Code. The Hays Code is a set of moral guidelines for the motion picture industry in the United States for all motion picture industries that were released between 1934 and 1968. The code was created by William Hays, who was president of MPPDA, otherwise known as the unabbreviated name, Motion Pictures Produce and Distributors of America. The code prohibits profanity, suggestive nudity, graphic or realistic violence, sexual persuasion, and rape. The idea was to prevent government censorship by censoring what was shown in films. In my opinion, it's kind of counterintuitive, but I guess it's the thought that counts. Speaking of censorship, let's look at the lack therefore of in the lovely film Psycho. Psycho was released in the 1960s, which is about 30 years into the Hays Code. And from the get-go, viewers are thrown into a rather scandalous scene from a young unmarried woman and a divorced man getting dressed after what we can assume is some aggressive cuddling. The scene alone is one of the biggest don'ts in the Hays Code. Not to mention the theft, violence, and death and psychological topics that were shown within 1 hour and 48 minutes. In Peter Howell's interview with David Thompson, Alfred Hitchcock basically said, "F you," within production of Psycho. Casualness of the language, sex, and violence that was shown is one of the most iconic stunts by Alfred Hitchcock. Alfred Hitchcock had danced to the melody of the Hays Code for about 30 years before deciding to make a movie about adults for adults. In the interview, David Thompson states, test the audience with a kind of violence that he had never done before. And I think he was becoming increasingly interested in disturbed psychology. The masterfully crafted scenes in Psycho has to be one of the most appreciated elements within the film. Out of all the elements within Psycho, my personal favorite is the foreshadowing. When Marilyn Crane, played by Janet Leigh, pulls into the Bates Motel, her car is covered in rain, which can be taken as what awaits her the next time she gets into the car. But the biggest foreshadowing in the movie is shown in dialogue in the settings surrounding Marilyn and Norman. The back and forth between the two gives lots of context to an underlying meaning that we later find out. When Marilyn mentions a possible solution to Norman's mother, we see a shift in his expression. The camera has dramatically turned into a low-angle shot. We can assume that his mother is the representation of the owl that is sitting behind him. Rather than the owl being a symbol of wisdom, the owl is positioned as the predator watching him. When Marilyn decides to take her leave, we see a stuffed crow mounted on the wall. Historically, crows are a symbol of death that have been the marking of tragedies in many stories. Not only does the crow symbolize her death, it's also hinting at her devastating demise. The pointed beak of the crow is angled at her neck, which is almost like a sharp pointed knife. For my first time watching Psycho, I believed it was referencing a TV called Psych. It's fascinating to see how different movies and TV shows have been influenced by Psycho. Many other TV shows have the iconic scenes as tribute to give back to the groundbreaking work that Alfred Hitchcock and his Psycho movie contributed to pop culture